Welcome back. Before we begin tonight's story, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, let's begin. Part 1, The Knock at 2:17 a.m. The rain started on a Thursday night. At first, it was nothing unusual, just a steady tapping against the windows of my apartment, the kind of sound that usually helped me fall asleep. By midnight, the rain had become much heavier. Wind pushed water against the glass, and every few seconds, lightning briefly lit up the room. I was alone in my apartment on the third floor of an old building in western Pennsylvania. Most of my neighbors had already gone to bed. I remember checking the time before putting my phone down. 2:11 a.m. 6 minutes later, I heard someone knocking. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up in bed. For a few seconds, I didn't move. Then I heard it again. 3 knocks. This time, they sounded like they were coming from my front door. I thought maybe one of my neighbors needed help. The storm had already caused the power to flicker twice, and the building's elevator had stopped working earlier that evening. I walked into the hallway. The apartment was completely dark except for the faint light coming from the street outside. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I waited. Nothing. Then suddenly, knock. I jumped backward. The sound had come from the other side of the door. I looked through the peephole again. Still nobody. I whispered, "Who is it?" No answer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I went back to my bedroom and checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. Then something strange happened. My phone received a text message. It was from an unknown number. The message contained only 6 words. "Don't answer the door. It's not me." I stared at the screen. I had no idea who had sent it. Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Stay away from the windows too." My stomach tightened. I slowly walked toward the living room. The rain was pounding against the windows so hard that I could barely see outside. Then lightning flashed. For a fraction of a second, I saw a person standing across the street, completely motionless. They were facing my building. I couldn't see their face. Another flash of lightning came. The person was gone. I stood there for several seconds, trying to convince myself that I had imagined it. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was different. "He's looking for apartment 3B. My apartment was 3B. I immediately called the police. While I waited for someone to answer, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow footsteps. Someone walked past my door, then stopped. I could hear breathing on the other side. I covered my mouth and stayed completely still. A few seconds later, the footsteps continued down the hallway. Then came 3 more knocks. But this time, they didn't come from my front door. They came from inside my apartment, from the bedroom, and I was standing in the living room. I slowly turned toward the dark hallway. Something moved inside my bedroom, and then the lights went out completely. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The apartment was completely black. I could hear the rain outside, the refrigerator humming somewhere behind me, and my own breathing. Then I heard it again. A soft knock. From my bedroom. Knock. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook across the hallway. Nothing. My bedroom door was open. I was certain I had left it open before walking into the living room, but now it looked different. It was only open a few inches. I took 1 step forward, then another. My phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. Another message from the unknown number. "Don't go in there." I froze. I typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came almost immediately. "You need to leave through the back stairs." I stared at the message. There was a problem. My apartment didn't have access to the back stairs. At least, I didn't think it did. I had lived there for almost 2 years. The only exit from my floor was the main staircase beside the elevator. Then I heard something scrape against the bedroom floor. It sounded like someone dragging a chair. I backed away. I decided to leave through the front door. I grabbed my keys and quietly unlocked the deadbolt. But before I could turn the handle, someone whispered from the other side, "Don't." I stopped breathing. The voice sounded like mine. Not similar. Not close. Exactly like mine. I stepped backward. The person outside whispered again, "Please, Open the door. I couldn't understand what was happening. Then my phone buzzed. He's outside your door. I looked at the message, then at the door. The voice came again. Please let me in. I didn't answer. A few seconds passed. Then the voice changed. It became deeper, angrier. Open the door. I moved toward the kitchen. There was a small window above the sink. I pulled the curtain aside and looked outside. The street was almost empty. Rainwater was rushing along the road. The person I had seen earlier was standing beneath a streetlight. This time I could see them clearly. It was a man. He wore a dark raincoat. His head was lowered, and he was holding something in his hand. A phone. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A new message appeared. Don't look at the man outside. I slowly looked back through the window. The man had raised his head. He was staring directly at me. Even from 3 floors up, I could tell he was smiling. Then his phone lit up. My phone lit up at exactly the same time. The message on my screen said, "He can see you." I immediately turned away from the window. Then I heard a loud crash from the hallway. Someone had slammed into my front door. The deadbolt shook. I grabbed a kitchen knife and backed toward the bathroom. Another hit. The door frame cracked. I was about to call 911 again when I noticed something strange. There was a small panel near the bottom of the bathroom wall. I had never noticed it before. It looked like an old wooden access door. Pulled it open. Behind it was a narrow, dark passage. Cold air rushed through the opening, and scratched into the wall inside the passage were 3 words. Apartment 3B watches. I stared at the words. Then I heard someone whisper behind me. Not from the hallway, not from outside, from inside the passage. You're finally awake. I dropped the knife, and somewhere deep inside the wall, someone started knocking. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I stood frozen in front of the opening. The voice inside the passage had disappeared. For several seconds, there was nothing but rain. Then I heard another sound, a faint electrical hum. It was coming from somewhere inside the wall. I grabbed my phone and pointed the flashlight into the passage. The opening was much deeper than it should have been. My apartment was built into a solid concrete section of the building. There shouldn't have been enough space behind the bathroom wall for a hallway, but there was. The passage was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide. Old pipes ran along the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. I didn't want to go inside, but behind me, my front door shook again. Someone was trying to break it down. I stepped into the passage. The wooden panel slowly swung shut behind me. I caught it before it closed. For some reason, I felt like I shouldn't let it lock. I moved forward. After about 20 feet, I found another door. It was painted black. There was no handle, only a small metal plate with 3 numbers stamped into it. 317. I touched the plate. The door opened. Inside was a tiny room, and that room made me forget about the person outside my apartment. There were photographs everywhere, hundreds of them. Some were attached to the walls. Others covered the floor. They were all photographs of my apartment building, but many of them showed my apartment, my bedroom, my kitchen, my living room. Some photographs were clearly taken through my windows. Others looked like they had been taken from inside the apartment. I picked up one photograph. It showed me sleeping in my bed. I recognized the shirt I had been wearing the previous night. My hands started shaking. I looked at the back of the photograph. There was a date written in black ink. October 14th. That was 2 months earlier. I picked up another. It showed me standing in the kitchen. Another showed me leaving for work. Another showed me sitting on the couch. Someone had been watching me for weeks, maybe months. Then I noticed something else. Every photograph had a small number written in the corner. 3B, 3B, 3B. All of them, except one. The last photograph showed the hallway outside my apartment. Standing beside my door was the man from the street, but the photograph had been taken from behind him. Someone else had been standing in the hallway, someone holding the camera. I turned the photograph over. There was a message written on the back. He isn't the one watching you. My phone buzzed. I nearly threw it across the room. The unknown number had sent another message. You found the room. I typed. Who are you? A reply appeared. Someone who lived in 3B before you. I stared at the screen. That didn't make sense. My landlord had told me the apartment had been empty for almost 8 months before I moved in. I typed, "What happened to you?" The response took longer this time. Then, I disappeared. Another message appeared immediately after. And tonight, you are going to understand why. I heard a door slam somewhere outside the hidden room. Then footsteps entered the passage. Slow, heavy, coming toward me. I turned off my flashlight. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a man's voice whispered from the darkness. Don't be afraid. I recognized the voice. It was the same voice that had spoken outside my apartment. My own voice. I held my breath. The voice whispered again. You shouldn't have found this room. Then I heard another sound. A phone ringing. Not mine. The ringing was coming from behind a stack of photographs. I moved the photographs aside. There was an old cell phone lying underneath them. The screen was already lit, and the caller ID showed one name, me. I stared at the screen as it continued ringing. Then the phone stopped. A second later, my own phone began ringing. The black door opened slowly. I couldn't see who was standing behind it. I kept my phone against my ear. The voice on the other end was breathing heavily. My voice. Whatever you do, it whispered. Don't turn around. I didn't. The door stopped moving. Then I heard footsteps enter the room. One step, then another. The floor creaked behind me. I stared at the wall covered in photographs. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the phone. Who is he? I whispered. There was silence on the call. Then my voice answered. You. I felt cold all over. What? You already met him. The call suddenly ended. I stood completely still. The footsteps behind me stopped. Then someone whispered directly beside my ear. You're not supposed to be here. I spun around. Nobody was there. The doorway was empty. I ran. I pushed through the passage and reached the bathroom. The wooden panel was still open. I climbed through and slammed it shut. Then I dragged a cabinet in front of it. A few seconds later, something hit the other side. Once, twice, then silence. I grabbed my phone and called 911 again. This time, the call connected. I whispered my address. The dispatcher asked if I was in immediate danger. Before I could answer, I heard something outside my apartment. 3 knocks. The dispatcher heard them too. Sir, are you alone? I looked toward the front door. Yes. Then the dispatcher said something that made my blood run cold. Sir, we have officers outside your building. I stared at the door. Already? Yes. They say someone reported a disturbance from your apartment. I hadn't reported anything. I asked the dispatcher to tell the officers to come upstairs. She said they were already on their way. A minute later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Then a man's voice called from the hallway. Police! Open the door. I almost cried from relief. I moved the cabinet away. But before I opened the door, my phone buzzed. The unknown number. Don't open it. I stared at the message. Another appeared. Those aren't police. Then I heard the man outside knock again. Sir, we know you're inside. The voice sounded professional. Calm. I looked through the peephole. 2 men stood outside, both wearing dark jackets. One held what looked like a flashlight. The other was staring directly at my door. Neither had a police badge visible. I stepped away. The man outside said, Open the door, or we'll come in. Then something strange happened. The hallway lights flickered. For 1 second, I saw a third person standing behind them. The man from the photographs. The man from the street. He was smiling. Then the lights came back. He was gone. The 2 men outside didn't react. As if they hadn't seen him. I backed away from the door. Then my phone buzzed again. This time there was an image attached. It was a photograph of my apartment door, taken from the hallway. The timestamp said 2:17 a.m., but underneath the photograph was another line. This picture was taken 3 years ago. I stared at the screen. 3 years ago, I hadn't even lived in this building. Another message appeared. You were never the first person in 3B. Then another. You weren't the second either. The pounding on the door suddenly stopped. The apartment became completely silent. I waited. Nothing. Then I heard a key sliding into the lock. Someone outside had a key. The deadbolt began turning. I ran toward the bathroom. But before I reached it, I heard a voice behind me. My own voice. Soft. Almost friendly. Don't hide. I stopped. Because the voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from my bedroom. I slowly turned toward the dark room. A silhouette stood inside. And when lightning flashed through the window, I saw his face. It was mine. Part 5. The rain never stopped for a moment. I couldn't breathe. The man standing in my bedroom had my face. Not someone who looked like me. Not a stranger with similar features. It was me. Same eyes. Same hair. Same small scar above my eyebrow. He was wearing the same clothes I had been wearing that night. He smiled. Then he raised one finger to his lips. Don't make a sound. I couldn't move. Behind him, lightning flashed again. For a split second, the bedroom was bright. And I saw something that terrified me even more. There was another version of me standing behind him. Then another. Then another. All of them were standing in the darkness. All of them looking directly at me. The lights went out again. I ran. I don't remember reaching the bathroom. I don't remember opening the hidden panel. I only remember crawling into the passage and pulling the wooden door shut behind me. The sounds from my apartment disappeared. I crawled through the darkness until I reached the black room. The photographs were still there, but something had changed. The walls were empty. Every photograph was gone, except one. It was lying in the center of the floor. I picked it up. It showed me sitting at my kitchen table, but the timestamp on the back said tomorrow's date. I dropped it. My phone buzzed. One final message appeared from the unknown number. Leave the building before the rain stops. I typed, "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "You already know." I stared at those words. Then another message arrived. "Check the first photograph." I searched through the room. There was only one photograph left. I turned it over. On the back was an old newspaper clipping. It described a man who had disappeared from apartment 3B 3 years earlier. The article included a photograph. I looked at the photograph. It was me, but the article said the missing man was named Daniel. I had never been called Daniel. At least, I didn't think I had. Then I noticed something written underneath the article. A handwritten sentence. Daniel wasn't the first. I heard footsteps in the passage. Someone was coming. I grabbed the photograph and ran toward the exit. When I finally reached the main hallway, the building was completely empty. No police. No neighbors. No men outside my door. Nothing. I ran down the stairs and out into the rain. The storm was still raging. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station several blocks away. I called the police from there. They searched the building. They found no hidden room, no photographs, no black door, and no evidence that anyone had entered my apartment. The strangest part came later. The landlord told the police that apartment 3B had been vacant for 3 years. He said nobody had rented it during that time. I showed him my lease. He looked at it for almost a minute. Then he asked me one question. "Who gave you the keys?" Couldn't remember. I remembered signing the lease. I remembered moving my furniture in. I remembered sleeping there for months. But I couldn't remember receiving the keys. I moved out the next morning. I never returned. For several weeks, nothing happened. Then, one rainy night, I received another message. Unknown number. No words. Just a photograph. It showed my current bedroom. The photograph had been taken from inside the room. I immediately called the police. They searched the house. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed again. A second photograph appeared. This one showed me sleeping. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. I checked the clock. It was 2:16. 1 minute later, someone knocked on my bedroom door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I never opened it. The rain continued until morning. And since that night, whenever it rains heavily, I hear those same 3 knocks. Always at 2:17. I don't know who is outside. I don't know who keeps taking the photographs. And I still don't know who sent me those messages. But there is one thing I have never told anyone. Last night, while I was writing this story, my phone received another photograph. It wasn't a picture of me. It was a picture of you. Or at least that's what the file was named. The next listener. And underneath it was one sentence. Don't look outside when the rain starts.